All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, SHIPIT Nation YouTube station? We're back Monday. We got 8 games on the docket. We got Coors Field, and I got a new face with me. Our guy Sheets joining me. Sheets, I know you're coming off the FanDuel live final there. Congrats to your top 10 finish. Our first show we've done together, our first show in general. I know you've been crushing multiple sports coming off the final, like I said, in baseball. How's it going, man? Happy Monday. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be able to join you. Title's out doing title things, so I offered to help him out wherever I could. Big fan of you guys over the years, and hope to be contributing a lot more to the SHIPIT Nation community going forward. And yeah, I did have 2 entries in the FanDuel thing yesterday, and I did not come in first in both DraftKings and FanDuel like BK Ryder did for 1.5 million. I got 9th and 57th in FanDuel, which is just fine by me. And that actually helped the SHIPIT games promotion because I donated 5% of those winnings to the overall pool at the end. I was very happy to do that, and really happy to have had a good run there. I'm looking forward to doing this with you guys because again, I'm used to analyzing things a little differently, and it'll be fun to see how this goes. I mean, it always starts with the probability of a train wreck. So anything kind of like better than a train wreck is always going to be a success. So hopefully I can contribute in a way that your users can appreciate.
No, absolutely. Glad to have you. I know you do a lot of live streamings and analyzing your own stuff in terms of tennis and MMA and multiple different sports there on your Twitter spaces and things like that. So glad to have you in the MLB. Again, congrats to the top 10 there. And absolutely amazing that you donated 5% back winning. So now we'll talk about it a little bit later when some more people get in here. The SHIPIT games, if you haven't heard already, there's multiple videos, multiple tweets right here. No other company in the industry. Everyone does free rolls. Everyone does this, a ticket here, a ticket there. But to come together with not only yourself and partner with another very powerful company in the industry like SaberSim and them stepping up as well to put forth for the members, right? The members that love our content and support us each and every day. That prize pool is up over $79,000 in terms of free roll for SHIPIT Nation subscribers. We'll talk more about that courtesy of you, courtesy of SaberSim, courtesy of SHIPIT Nation, obviously ourselves, putting a huge chunk of money towards that for the NFL season, which is right around the corner. So excited to talk about that here. I'm going to go ahead and pull our partner, like I talked about, SaberSim here up on the screen. And we'll talk about the dry run. Before we do, we got Max Manning in here. We got Rodney. We got Juice. We got AZ Bob. I am Rice. Ian, Big Ed, our guy Rio coming off the live final for DraftKings. I know it wasn't the finish he hoped for, but hey, just making it, being one of the top 100 there. And it's like we talked about, Sheets ahead of the time, right? When you have 1 seat or 2 seats compared to some of the players like a BK Crider, right, that have multiple seats or even maxed out. Gets pretty tough in a high sport variance, in a variance sport like baseball, but still an incredible feat to get there. Brittany's in here, Gene, Jason Turner, everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a ton. Sheets, I'll throw it over to you right away off the top here to kind of talk broad slate overview. I know 8-game slates, kind of the wheelhouse in terms of games. I like the 6 to 8 game range quite a bit. A little bit different when you have the Dodgers heading into Coors Field to face that team that the Rockies keep trotting out every single day in that pitching staff. So obviously an important point there. And then we have a really cheap guy, or 2 cheap guys really, projections-wise, that make it pretty easy to play those teams. So any broad slate overview before we do jump in and talk pitchers just off the top here?
First of all, let me shout out to Ranger 13, noticing the Zizix Road sign up from behind my shoulder. I could do a probably 2-hour podcast just on the history of how that picture ended up on my wall. But good on you for finding that. Yeah, so the first thing I like to look at is, as far as an overall slate overview, is first of all kind of like the way the slate plays out as far as timing goes. So I do see, I'm talking Eastern, like 2 7 o'clocks, an 8 o'clock, and 8:40, and then a break, like an hour to these 9:40 games. I mention it because I late swap every single night. So I try to look to see which of the later games and which of the possibilities for late swap. So that's the first thing I look at. And then the other thing I look at is the fact that it's going to be Coors, and it's Dodgers at Coors. And when you have Dodgers at Coors, that's going to be the main focal point is can you play them? Do you want to play them? What pitchers are available to let you play them? And even if you can play them, do you want to play them, depending on what type of contest you're in? So listen, I have no preference. 6 games, 8 games, 13 games, 74 games, 2 games. You know, if they're paying a lot for first, I'll degen them all to freaking day. I don't really care. So one thing I will say, though, is given this slate size, I'm not going to demand all 5 2s and 5 3s as far as my stacks as far as SaberSim goes. When it's like a full 9 or 10 games, I'll do that. But 6, 7, 8 games or whatever, I will allow maybe some 4-4s and things like that. That's the only thing I'll say is about slate size going into today.
Yeah, no, excellent breakdown there. And late swap is definitely a crucial part. I mean, especially when you have, an hour before the start of the slate, or an hour and a half really before that Coors Field, and then an hour after that game for the 3 late games, 2 decent totals late as well to make pivots, right? You kind of have an idea of where you're sitting for the most part, at least in terms of ownership in your roster and that. And you ultimately want to always give yourself, right, the best chance to get to the top, right? Because these tournaments are so top heavy. So no, excellent breakdown there. Appreciate you kind of giving that. And it is interesting, like I said, because there is 3 games late, right, where there is going to be good plays, and one of those games in particular has a pretty nice total with pretty nice weather in it as well, which I know I like to focus on a lot in baseball, parks and weather, at least somewhere where we can try and match the output that potentially a Coors Field could display here tonight. So when we jump in, talk pitching here, we're going to go 8K and above sheets. I have the dry run up on the screen in terms of partnership with SaberSim. I left 5-2 stacks, 5-3 stacks, 4-3 stacks in there, and kind of just ran 150 teams based on projections, just to kind of get an idea of what the slate looks like. And you see right there in terms of the exposure, this is just an average of our projections at SHIPIT Nation and SaberSim. You got it 95% Cortez getting slammed in projections because of his price point there at 6,500 when you have expensive Dodgers. You got Medeiros there at about 30%, then Strider, May, and Yamamoto. And then it's pretty much nobody else. It's no man's land between the rest of them. So when you jump in above 8K, you got Singer down there at 8K. You got Waka, you got Gavin Williams, high-powered arm, right? Lots of strikeout potential. There's always the downside, 4 walks and control issues. You got Chad Patrick that's slotted to start. I know that's the second game of the doubleheader there with the Brewers and the Cubs going on right now. So he's slotted, him and Tyon, not officially confirmed, but I believe that's who's going to be going. And then you got the 4 guys at the top above 9K. You got Trevor Rogers, you got Yamamoto, you got Robbie Ray, and you got Spencer Strider all the way up at the top. So when you take a look at those arms above 8K, what are you kind of seeing? Where are you going? Where are you breaking down? Are you jumping in on Strider? I know there's been talks, right? Strider's broken, things like that. White Sox have not been the same White Sox matchup at the beginning of the year as of late. So break it down for us. Where are you going?
Well, I guess I'll ask you this question first. So first of all, as an aside, I'm starting to do some of these kind of like premium videos on how to use SaberSim for SHIPIT Nation members. And I did one for baseball. I don't know when they're going to put it up or whatever. And I guess I wanted to ask you, because this dry run that you put out, I want to give everybody, I guess, a little context, because, you know, whatever percentage you're getting is going to sort of depend on what type of contest that you're firing, you know, like, because I have a portfolio of lineups that might be different than yours. So when you ran the dry run, are you building it for 150 max? Are you building it for single entry? I mean, how are you building this? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I have no contest loaded in here. I'm just taking the projections, are the average of our projection and SaberSim, the average ownership as well, which kind of combines everything, just to give an idea. And instead of using the portfolio management tool over here, I went back to kind of the baseline before they added in the Portfolio Plus and the diversity to just be able to give us to sort by Saber score and that. And I just filtered it to projected score. So this is the top 100 and 50 projected lineups that people might build in terms of a tournament. So I didn't allow all the stacks in there. I limited to 4 4s, 4 3s, 5 3s, 5 2s, kind of to give more of a tournament style approach, right? And see what projections, because otherwise, if you don't do that, I find it's really just putting together a bunch of projection driven plays. At least this gives it a little bit extra step towards more of a tournament approach that someone just clicking a button, right, optimize and give you an idea of what the slate looks like.
So let me get back to it again, and this could be a train wreck because I do tend to kind of stray into what I was trying to think about. But I'll give you my idea about these guys over 8K. But remember that everybody out there, I mean, this is a game of not players, it's a game of lineups. So when you're thinking about whether you're playing a 10K, it's not just whether the 10K is better than a 6K guy. Like you have to think of a 6K pitcher in terms of what the pitcher brings you. So I don't really look at whether like Strider is better than Cortez, for example. It's Cortez plus Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, X. Is that going to be better than say Strider? I don't know, Tauchman, whatever, you know what I'm saying. So with respect to that, even the guys over at 8K, they're fishy in kind of different ways. So Spencer Strider is going to show up as the top projected guy on the slate, which he always seems to. And the reason why that is because the way projection models always work is they really take like a real long view. Okay, they don't just look at the last two starts, the last three fights, the last 5 starts. They go back sometimes 2 years, and there's positives and negatives to that. Like it's positive because you do want a large sample size before you create a projection. But on the other hand, like if structural things happen to pitchers over at some point, okay, and then you take into account that which happened before that structural change, you might be under or overselling them. And the Strider, listen, if I didn't know that Strider did what he did like a year and a half ago, I'd be looking at this dude. I'd be looking, this guy can't get out of his own way. The guy should be 6K. I mean, what the hell is going on here? But because the way projection models work, they just go ahead and they factor in all that stuff that happened a year and a half or 2 years ago. So I actually think that most of the Strider projections throughout the industry are just going to continue to be too high, like just for some period of time. And on the other hand, you take a guy like Trevor Rogers, for example, you know what I mean? And if at first it seems like really weird to see him at like 9K, because we know Trevor Rogers from like a couple of years ago, he couldn't get out of his own way. But it's possible that things have really changed for him, since he's come to Baltimore or whatever. So I'm not saying that Rogers is a better play than Strider. I'm just saying that I think the Rogers projection is probably a little low, actually, where the Strider projection is probably a little bit high. So as far as the over 8K guys, though, the guy I honestly feel weirdly the most comfortable with is gonna be Yamamoto. Even though it's at Coors Field, at least he's bringing it every day. At least I know what I'm getting with my projection. It's very, very solid. It's factoring in everything is supposed to be factoring in. There's no like weird biases one way or another. So if I had to, go to the top and say which ones I like the most, I mean, for me, it would be Yamamoto. And then after that, it would probably be Robbie Ray. And hey, I see him, he's on the cover, right? And I'd probably like him next. Again, not because I think he's necessarily better or worse than these guys, but I just think that you're at least getting what you're getting with Robbie Ray. I mean, you're getting a volatile pitcher who has strikeout upside. He's in not the greatest strikeout matchup of all time, okay, but yet still, I mean, he could still bring it. So if I had to select the top 2 from above that, I would say Yamamoto and Ray before Strider. And Rogers, like I said, his projections are still probably a little low. I still think that 9K is probably a little bit too much for him. So I would say Yamamoto, Ray at the top for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you think or a lot of what you said there. And I'll hit on Strider in particular. And you nailed it, right? Projection systems, just the nature of it, right? You don't want a projection because a guy comes in like a Strider, right? Rookie last year before the injury, comes in and just has a 36% K rate, right? You don't want a guy that comes into the league and you're basing a projection system off of 2 or 3 starts, right? Because that does nobody good. But when you look at a span like a Spencer Strider, right, with the longevity of what the projections, like you talked about, are driving. This 19 seems very high for me. I mean, you look at his last 30 days, his last month, things happen with these pitchers, right? They have minor injuries. They're pitching through, right? We only hear what the media tells us. And you look at Spencer Strider, his strikeout numbers have not been at the 30+% that he was when he came into the league. He's dropped down to sub 20% strikeouts over the last month. And you look at the White Sox matchup here, they're right around 20% K rate against right-handed pitching over the last month as well, right? So for 10K, with him going to command ownership just due to the nature of the slate and the name value alone, that's where I have some slight concern and pause, because you nailed it, right? You have the Dodgers that have a 7 implied run total facing Kyle Freeland and that Rockies pitching staff in the best ballpark for hitting on the slate. Is Strider really worth $4,000 more than a Cortez that can allow you to get to a Betts, a Freeman, in Ohtani of the world? So you really have to kind of weigh that into it. I'm going to be under on Strider tonight. I'm with you. Yamamoto feels like the safest option up top for me. It's scary. It's Coors Field. It's all of that. But Yamamoto, you know what you're going to get with him. He's going to go 95 to 100 pitches if he's pitching well. His K prop's right in line with the rest of the slate. He's sitting at 6.5. Basically pick him plus 105, some slight juice on the under. Strider sitting at 7.5 with some slight juice on the under. So for me, it's definitely Yamamoto SP1 if you can afford him and get up to him on the slate. And then Robbie Ray, I think Robbie Ray is the type of pitcher you always know, right? Boom bust. He can go out there and he can get you 30, or he can go out there and start walking guys and get you sub 10 fantasy points. But when he has his stuff, it doesn't matter what matchup he is, even in a low strikeout matchup like the Padres, his ceiling performance and when he has his pitch arsenal that he can display, it doesn't matter the matchup, right? There's certain guys in baseball and a lot of these aces, it doesn't matter the matchup. When they have their stuff, they have their stuff, and it really doesn't matter too much what lineup they're facing. So for me, I'm with you there. And then Trevor Rogers is actually kind of my third favorite guy up here. The reason being is the nature of the slate, right? We don't really have too many guys where I think can kind of dwarf him in terms of ceiling potential. 9K does feel like a little too much, but again, it's the nature of the slate. He's still $1,000 cheaper than Spencer Strider. You look at Trevor Rogers, he's gone almost 100 pitches in many of his last starts. He's been pitching really well. Scary matchup going into Fenway, but again, Yamamoto's in Coors Field. Robbie Ray's facing the Padres. So the nature of the slate, I like those three the most at the top. And then my fourth guy above 8K that I'll give a look to is Brady Singer. The reason being is the strikeouts that the Angels display, they have a ton of power throughout that lineup, but they do have a lot of strikeouts, and we're chasing strikeouts. Strikeouts are weighed so heavily in terms of DraftKings and FanDuel scoring for DFS purposes is what we're concerned about. Singer, 5.5K prop, juice on the over, and he gets this Angels lineup that, yeah, has a lot of power and can give him some fits, but overall, I think he does have enough strikeout potential to match some of the performances that maybe Yamamoto, a Rogers, a Ray, a Strider up at the top can display. So that's kind of where my take is, going above 8K there. If you had to pick another guy, I think Gavin Williams is interesting. He's much like a Robbie Ray, in my opinion, a little less caliber overall of an arm, but if he has his strikeout stuff, he has tons of strikeout upside. You worry about the walks there. D-backs got a young roster. They have the big guys at the top, right, that were locked in long-term. And then they got a bunch of young prospects that can be boom bust there. So Gavin Williams, I think, does have strikeout potential, 8,500. Not many people are going to click that name. So in tournaments, I don't mind that as well.
Well, Nate, let me ask you a question. So one of the issues I always had when I say growing up in DFS with content was, okay, you get these takes and what do you do with them? You know what I mean? Like I'm usually like an automatic guy. I'll put my projection in the SaberSim. I'll run my stuff, and I won't complain about what I get one way or the other. And then if I get this external take, I worry what to do with it. Like I'm sitting here, I'm listening to even myself, and I'm saying, okay, I think Strider probably is overprojected. I think that Rogers underprojected. Let's take Strider for example. Like what do I do with that? Like, I always struggle with that. Do I just reduce his projection by a point or two? Do I manually reduce his ownership, my exposure? And it's very complicated, because on the one hand, you want to trust your process and you want to trust your tools. But then if you have this kind of take, you don't want to overstate it. you don't want to override all of your processes. So again, I don't know what, type of people are usually watching this particular stream, whether it's a person that's going to just put in one lineup or if it's a serious player that's going to put in like 50 or 150 lineups. If it's 50 or 150 lineups, I have like kind of a different like approach for you guys. I would say just ignore everything I said. Say it's everything is in the projection and just kind of roll with it. But if you're just having fun and you just want to, I don't know, how do you deal with that? I would say that, I don't know, maybe Strider, if you're playing one lineup and you were going to play him otherwise, maybe don't, or something like that. If you're playing like 20 max, maybe again, like if you're going to get to 5 or 6, then maybe do some less. But when it comes to like multiple builds and playing 150 lineups and all that stuff, I wouldn't do too much. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't say, well, I don't like Strider, so I'm an X amount, or I don't like Strider because, I'm going to put in max 20% of it. I think that if you mess with those settings too much, I think you're kind of asking for trouble.
And I agree with that a lot. So the Power Saber Sim, I let the Power Saber Sim in the portfolio diversification, right? After I do kind of my own process, right? And kind of manual tweak some of the team stacks that I want to go in on, right? Because I don't just allow everyone in the pool. I do make some cuts here and there and then let the power of the optimizer kind of do its thing. I filter this. A lot of times what I do, adding on to that is I'll filter this. I do have the ultimate plan with Saber Sim. So I will filter this to kind of what the ownership looks like in terms of the different contests. So if I am playing a 20 max, right, I'll take a look at kind of what the flagship 20 max is projecting Strider to come in at. And I see, anywhere from 25 to low 30s in terms of percentage, right? So if I know I don't like Strider a ton, but I don't want to, if Strider goes out there and does throw his 7 strikeouts or 8 strikeouts game, right, kind of what his K-prop indicates, I don't want to have myself be dead in the water, right, before the slate kind of even gets to those late games, right, being the early slate. So what I tend to do is typically tend to put more of a max exposure on it and just to let it. So I would probably just leave this projection where it is, or you can down it a little bit, but I know with this projection, if I don't put a max, it's probably going to slam him in a lot of teams that aren't Dodgers, or even it's going to do more mini stacks with Dodgers and Strider. So what I'll tend to do is if I know he's going to come in 25 to, let's just say 35%, right? Just give a 10 percentage point gap in there to allow for kind of the uncertainties, right? With projected ownership, I'll say I'll go 25%. So then I still have a fourth of my portfolio that has Strider, so I still have a chance, right? And then only at the end of the day, realistically, only one lineup can win, right? So you still have a chance to the top if Strider does go out there and kind of has a ceiling performance, right? So that's kind of how I approach it. And I'm glad you brought that point up because it is, right? A lot of viewers in these YouTube chats and our member base, right, listen to these shows. And to your point, right, what do they do with the takes, right? Just because we're under and we think Strider is projected too high, he still does have that in his deck of cards, right? And we're still playing a probability, and we're still, at the end of the day, we don't know what these guys are going to do, right? It's very high variance sport in general. So that's typically what I'll do just to make sure that, again, I'm not a fan of kind of Xing guys out that do have that performance, that if they go out there and you have 0 Strider, well, it's probably going to be pretty tough for you to find your way to the top of the leaderboards if he goes out there and scores his 30 DraftKings points with the rest of the pitchers on the slate that have a high likelihood that they don't match that kind of ceiling performance. Is kind of what I do there.
So who do you like? I'm sorry. So who do you like of these cheapos, these pitchers?
Yeah. So the cheap guys. We got to talk about Cortez, right? 6,500 coming back off the IL. I think it's second start back now. There's 3 cheap guys I think that are going to command ownership. It's going to be Midros at 5K. It's going to be Cortez as kind of probably the highest owned pitcher on the slate, and then Dustin May. So those 3 guys, for me, it's kind of the safety of Cortez, to be honest, just because of the Giants strikeouts that they have, that ballpark out there in Petco. However, when you're playing Cortez, you got to know that if you're playing Cortez, I might look to do something different with the Dodgers, right? Because every Cortez lineup is likely going to be 5 Dodgers, and it's going to probably include Betts, Tio Hernandez, Ohtani, Freeman, 3 of those 4, I would assume. So that's kind of how I'm going to approach it in single entry and 3 max strategies. When I'm using Cortez, take a look at how I'm playing the Dodgers, and maybe I play the back half of the Dodgers, or maybe I use the Dodgers as a mini stack and go in on a different team like the Braves or like the Reds or one of these other teams on this, or a Cubs, right? A high upside Cubs offense that, doesn't project like the Dodgers do, but could match the ceiling performance that the Dodgers display. And then you have a different roster construction in the field. So for me, it's Cortez at the bottom, and then Dustin May are kind of the two guys that I like with the, I'll say with the field, but when I'm playing Cortez, I'm going to be weary on how I play the Dodgers personally for myself. How about you below 8K?
All right. I got something maybe that's a little different. Maybe it's also somewhat instructive. First of all, Dustin May makes a lot of sense to me. Baltimore's coming off a 37-run performance and then traveling, into Boston. And Dustin May is, listen, he's really, he's pitching his ass off. He got booted out, whatever. He got booted out of LA. Baltimore has him. Listen, they're committing to him. You know what I mean? Like, he's at 6,900. I think Boston is committing to him. I think he's really, really solid here. At 6,900, a very, very logical pivot off of Cortez, who's obviously going to be really chalky. And then you mentioned Medeiros being, 5K, and his ability is nothing other than to survive to get to your Dodger stacks, or to whoever stacks you want. And all of that makes sense. But I want to talk about the other guy. I want to talk about Gomez in this White Sox Atlanta game, okay? Because we talk about projections and how you have median projections, and all median projections are not created equal. You have this dude Gomez who had a 33%, I think, strikeout rate in the minors. And he comes up, and I think he had a pretty good outing in his first start, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's bringing into the majors, bringing into this start all kinds of variants, okay? He very likely can walk 7 guys. He very likely can get lit up, but he also has upside that we just don't know about. And so you put like a projection of whatever, let's just say it's like 10, like of him. And then you have a projection of Medeiros, and maybe it's 10, right? Same thing. But Gomez, he has upside to that. Like, if he gets it going, he could score 20 points. And he really could. He could also score -10 or something like that. So again, depending on what type of contest you're in, like you're playing like the knuckleball and you're trying to beat like 75,000 people and you need like a 200-point score, I think that Gomez is almost like a preferred play to Medeiros, like for me, okay? Because again, Medeiros, I think he's gonna get a little bit of ownership, like especially with the Dodger stacks and things like that. So if you want to listen, you're almost assuredly going to get blown up here, but we don't care if you get 173rd. Okay, like if you're not going to get in the top 10, I may as well get 5,000. I don't need to get 173rd. So I actually like Gomez like more than Medeiros, and I think Gomez is actually a pretty reasonable pivot off of Cortez. Like specifically though, in the big GPPs where you need like a zillion points and you need to beat a zillion people. In 3 max, 20 max and below, I think that, by the way, I don't even think you need Medeiros in those contests. I think like May and Cortez, I think you can get to whatever you need. You'll probably have to play those two together, like to really get what you need. But I think Cortez is reasonable. I think May is reasonable. And I like Gomez as a high upside play over Medeiros.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Gomez. He's a direct pivot right off of, I'll say, May, Cortez, and Medeiros, because his pitch count, right? His first start, he went 89 pitches. You look at Cortez. Cortez has not topped 85 pitches yet this season for the Padres here. He's going to be much more popular there. Yeah, it's the matchup, everything there. But Gomez, he is a fly ball guy, but he does have strikeouts, right? And we're playing for ceiling potential, right? The likelihood of all of these guys realistically down here, Medeiros, Gomez, even Cortez and May, to get blown up is far more likely than them to go out there and put up 30 DraftKings points, right? But in MME contests where, like on DraftKings tonight or on the main FanDuel contest where you have to beat 30, 40,000 people, to your point, you're playing a lot of averages, right? And the probability of them outscoring kind of what their projection is what you're playing into, right? So I do like that you brought that up. There is strikeouts to be had in this Atlanta offense. It's not the same Atlanta offense that won the World Series a couple years back, right? There is strikeouts throughout this lineup. And I do like that at 5,500 when you know nobody's clicking that name. He's going to be sub 10% owned, where Madero's projected to be in the mid-20s. Cortez going to be probably 45, upper 40s, and then Dustin May going to be over 20 as well. I think that pivot is very, very sharp there as well. So I do like that quite a bit there. Any additional closing takes on the pitchers before we kind of jump over and talk hitting?
Nope.
Awesome. Excellent breakdown there. Before I do, if you guys are looking for a home, Sheets is with us over here at the Nation. And like he said, right, he is doing these premium breakdowns for SHIPIT Nation subscribers. He did do his baseball one, his breakdown on his process on how he uses SaberSim, right? Just kind of peeling back some of those layers of the onions, right? There's a ton of expertise and tweak and go process and results are kind of all over the board in terms of how he uses an optimizer compared to how somebody else might use an optimizer, right? And at the Nation, it's not just a picks and plays, right? Who's Sheets' core tonight? I got to play that. And if he wins, I'm going to win, right? We're trying to teach everyone in our member base to be better players themselves and equip them with tools to help make their own decisions. Because at the end of the day, you're entering your own lineups, right? Nobody else is clicking those names for you or uploading your CSV or uploading your teams for you, right? So if we can teach you to build a process and create a process, at least it's repeatable or repeatable, excuse me. That way you can at least know, okay, if you're successful this night, what did you do? How did you get there? And how did you leverage our tools to be able to repeat that process? Because at the end of the day, right, we are trying to be profitable DFS players, whether you play full-time, whether you play casually. So having process like that and like videos like Sheets and Rio and the rest of the team have done to use our tools is what we're all about. So with NFL right around the corner, there's no better time than now to get in. ShipItNation.com. You did miss the early bird package. We are still cheaper than anywhere else across the industry. You can double check for yourself out there, different competitors. You see the graphic up on the screen. It says $349. It is $449, which is still cheaper than anywhere else, like I said, in the industry. And you get access to the SHIPIT games. I'll put it up here on the screen because we got Sheets up here who did increase. It started at $77,700. It is now up to $79,267 in free cash prizes. If you go to ShipItNation.com/games, all of it is explained right here on how it works. Basically, there's 3 chances to win a golden SHIPIT a week during the NFL year. And then at the end of the season, the top 50 who do win the golden SHIPIT tickets there play for the top prizes that are broken down here, along with the SaberSim packages. So the ultimate package, which is over $4,300 in value for the top 3. And then it pays all the way down to 50th place. And this is just a starting point. Again, like I said, it's all broken down here on the screen. You get ballots. And if you want to join, ShipItNation.com, click the early bird package for the NFL. Get NFL locked in for the entire year. You get college football. I know Sheets. Do you dabble much in college football, Sheets?
You can't play it in New York.
Okay, you can't play it in New York. Yeah. So unfortunately, Sheets is not in the college football streets. So hey, maybe that gives you a little bit better chance to the top of the leaderboard there. But we do have an entire college football team with projections, with ownership, with everything, shows, a Discord live breakdown every Saturday morning as well, which does they do that in Discord for SHIPIT Nation subscribers. So no, like I said, no better place in the industry there. And like I talked about, we have tools to help build a process, and it's just not picks and plays, 1v1, 2v2 questions in the Discord. We're trying to create better players and build a better community of like-minded individuals to continue and grow for the same overall goal, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to win money. We're all trying to ship it. We're all trying to get to the top of the leaderboards there. Sheets. First game on the slate for hitting, we are going to that Fenway game. Dustin May, we talked about. Trevor Rogers, we talked about. Fenway is typically a decent place to play bats. In terms of weather, not very favorable conditions. Temperatures in the mid to low 60s here. Some kind of slight wind, not really a factor, but temperatures in the low 60s. We're kind of getting into that middle part of August, right? September baseball, where it's not the heart of the June, July season, right, where we're seeing 95 degrees across the country. We got 2 solid pitchers on the slate here. Orioles coming off an incredible series. I mean, you needed the Orioles pretty much to ship anything last night on that Sunday slate where they put up 12 runs. Different matchup, different game here. And again, it's daily fantasy sports. Any breakdowns in terms of hitters here in Fenway against either of these pitchers here?
The way that I look at a game like this, and there's plenty of these every single slate, are I think that the pitchers are just good enough to keep me off of the hitters. And likewise, I think the hitters are probably good enough to keep me from overplaying the pitchers, So I just think that there's just better options here. I mean, listen, if I play 150, and I will, I'll just get to them because, when it's hashtag baseball, anything can happen, But I don't think either of these teams are anything of a priority for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. I think I give a slight lean to some of the Orioles lefties. If I was in MME, probably don't get to them in 20 max. Definitely don't get to them in single entry 3 max. But in the 150 max, hot teams in baseball. Hey, I know they're coming in with travel, all of that. But Dustin May, if you do peel back the onion a little bit and look at a longer sample size between just his time that he's been with the Orioles here, which sometimes that does change a pitcher, right? Or change a hitter. You see it with Andrew Vaughn, right? Coming over to the Brewers. You see it with a lot of these guys. Change of scenery sometimes does change how they overall perform. Dustin May historically has struggled a little bit with some power and fly balls to some of the lefty hitters there. So wouldn't hate some of the lefties. You'll get a little leverage as well on Dustin May there, but it's definitely more of a pitcher game for me personally, and with 8 games on the slate, I don't think you have to get to it too heavily on either side personally myself. Next game on the slate, we do have Spencer Strider and Gomez. We talked about Gomez as a pivot on the low tier, but again, he's $5,500 for a reason. Braves implied to score over 5 runs, -206 favorites here at home. It is hot in Atlanta here. Some slight wind blowing out, nothing too crazy. But temperatures are going to be in the upper 80s here, even 90 degrees throughout the duration of this game. We know it's a decent place to hit in general. White Sox bullpen, not very good. Braves bullpen, not very good either. Break down this game in terms of hitters here in Atlanta.
So in the older version of SaberSim, the one that didn't have the portfolio diversifier, or whatever, what you'd end up with if you ran everything, you'd probably end up with like 50% White Sox. Like that's just the way it was. Like you would get the highest projected pitcher with the highest ownership, and you would just jam like the cheapos against him. With the new portfolio diversifier, it's not quite as simple as that. So you're not going to get as much White Sox as maybe you're used to. I figured I would just bring that up. And depending on what setting you use for SaberSim, it really is going to dictate how much White Sox you get. But with respect to the Braves, like here's the way I look at it on a slate like this. Like whenever you have like Dodgers in Coors, you have to think of like who's going to be able to compete, with the Dodgers. And yes, you could just have the Dodgers like just throw it a dud, and we'll get to that game later. But assuming the Dodgers perform a little bit, I mean, the Braves, like for all the reasons that I thought that Gomez was a good high upside, play here, he's also a huge downside play. He's got serious control issues. He's got a fly ball lean and weather, which is very favorable to home runs and hitting. And you have a bullpen behind them, which is terrible. I mean, the Braves had like 15-run upside here. You know what I mean? Like, and again, when you're playing the knuckleball and things like that, like that's what you have to look for is just like extreme upside. So I think that Atlanta, and this might be even almost too obvious, but Atlanta seems to be like the very, very uber obvious pivot to the Dodgers. Back in the day, maybe even like a year or two ago, I would look for the pivot of the pivot. You know what I mean? So I would even think the Braves might be too obvious, but we'll get to that some other time. But I think the Braves are very, very clearly the challenger for the Dodgers for the top overall score. So I think the Braves are in 3 max, 20 max, whatever you want. I think you could jam as much of those you can get in. So White Sox again in 150 max, you're gonna have to get to some of it, but I think Atlanta is gonna be like obviously what you want to focus on.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. I mean, we mentioned all of the things in terms of the pitcher, and you hit on it too. Anytime you have a pitcher with a fly ball lean and potential control issues, that can lead to a disaster in terms of overall scoring. And then if you get to that bullpen early for the White Sox, you're probably licking your chops and have a pretty good chance overall to do some damage. Tyler Alexander is probably going to be unavailable as well here for the White Sox there. In terms of their bullpen usage, 4 guys, 24, 27, 32, and then 51 pitches, 51 being Tyler Alexander over the weekend through on Saturday. He's likely unavailable for this game too, which is one of their bullpen arms down as well there. So that does go to the Braves there. In terms of ownership, they should be kind of in the mid-teens, which isn't going to be crazy. Anytime you have Coors Field, ownership doesn't really matter in general. If you play guys at the back half, like an Albies who's hitting 7th, or an Alvarez at a weak third base position, naturally you're going to be different with your Brave stacks right there. So for me, I like all 8 guys for the Braves. Nick Allen, I don't love a ton, but again, you're going to get some Nick Allen if you are 150 max. And if I'm hand plugging or a single entry 3 max team, kind of virtual hand building with SaberSim, probably not getting to Nick Allen in there. But again, Braves, good plays. On the White Sox side, I do want to talk about the White Sox a little bit because I do think the White Sox are more intriguing than what projections are going to say. And yeah, you did mention, right, the old SaberSim before they did add. Naturally, if you just kind of blindly ran it, you're going to be so heavily exposed to the White Sox offense just due to the nature of the leverage, right, and potential ceiling outcome that you're probably – the chances of you winning are much less than kind of with the new SaberSim and adding tweaks in that. Because ultimately it's always just going to jam the highest leverage stack, because if it hits, right, you have the most probability to win the most amount of money. I will say Strider, you look at Strider over the last month, lefties, he still has his strikeout stuff against righties, but lefties, he's come up with his walks and his strikeouts. I mean, 13.5 K percentage to the left side, 11% walk rate, 289 ISO allowed. I mean, some of these lefties for the White Sox are pretty interesting to me. Colson Montgomery, Mike Tauchman, Benintendi, even Kyle Teo, Brooks Baldwin, all those guys right there all hit from the left side. They all hit the ball in the air. They all have power against right-handed pitching. Nobody's going to play them. And then adding in the Braves bullpen, which is kind of middle of the road in general. And then you look at them, they threw 4 bullpen arms yesterday, 13, 24, 27, 17 pitches. And then Stratton threw 43 on Saturday. He'll be unavailable likely today. Pretty taxed bullpen, full 9 at bats in the exact same hitting environment as the Braves against a guy that has, it is Spencer Strider. He could go out there and strike out 8 of these guys. But again, we're playing for ceiling potential. I think the lefties for the White Sox are pretty interesting, even in 20 max and potentially even 3 max type contest, because it will let you get to those Dodger stacks differently than what the field's going to do. I think the field a lot of times is going to go to some of those cheap Braves in the back or the Royals, which we'll talk about in this next game. So if you can play those type of lineups with in high upside offense like the White Sox lefties could portray here in this hitting environment, I think it's a pretty interesting way to approach the slate in general.
Yeah, I'll comment on Shalu. I don't pronounce it right, Shalu, but obviously you see him and having all of his successes in the Discord quite a lot. And when I hear a comment like that, he's there. He likes the mini stats. Again, it's what. So does that mean that I don't even know if he's a SaberSim user? That if I hear what he's saying, that I like the White Sox, I like a team in general, but for whatever reason, I just don't feel like 5-man. You know what I mean? I just don't think they have the upside for 5-man. So now you're going into SaberSim or whatever optimizer you're using, and you're saying, okay, I'll take White Sox, but only if I'm having like a 3-man stack. And then that's sort of old school in a way. You know what I mean? Just to say, okay, this is what I want. I don't care what SaberSim is giving me. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what kind of an interesting philosophical a battleground right now is whether you want to tell SaberSim what to do or let SaberSim do what it does. So I typically, if I'm just gonna run it, and if the White Sox show up in 5-mans, it's just for reasons that SaberSim's algorithms and lineup building just know better than me. And I'll just say, based on my experience, like every single time that I've like won something, okay, really, really big, it's always been like a lineup that I never would have conceived of myself. Okay, like I would say, okay, I want 30% of this, 30%, 27%. Whenever I do that, it just never works out. It's always like, wow, this is the one that's winning. Okay, it sounds good to me. wherever I try to tell it what to do, it always seems to, I don't say backfire, but I just never seem to get there, and maybe I'm just, not as no ballish or whatever and can't construct it like that. But I think that using SaberSim to build in certain ways, I know what people want to do. They want to create this thing in their head, like, I want to play this, and I hope SaberSim agrees with me. Okay. And that's what people do. And that's the way they use it. What I use it for is like a little differently. Like when I'll run my lineups and I'll say, wow, I'm getting this. I'm kind of using it as a learning tool. I'm like, wow, this is what I'm actually getting. I was expecting to get this. Why do you suppose that I'm getting that? And to me, that's what I think the technology is really, really good for. And that was straying again, and I'm maybe getting too far into the weeds, but yeah, like the White Sox. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I mean, naturally, you are going to get some 5-man stacks. If it was me personally, hand building, probably don't get to a 5-man White Sox. But again, I mean, at the end of the day, all of these teams have, I mean, pretty similar likelihood to score most amount of runs realistically on the slate, especially when I talked about the Braves bullpen, the hitting environment, right? And anybody hand building or to your process, right? I want 28% of this. I want 30% of this. I want 15% of that, right? Kind of tweaking the optimizer. There's a lot more people doing that, in my opinion, than vice versa, to your point, right? Where you hit on, because people are going to see 5 White Sox and say, okay, what's the chances of them outscoring the Dodgers in Coors Field, right? And they're going to uncheck that.
Well, that's why I don't look anymore.
Right, exactly.
Build it, launch it, fire it, and then after lock, if I feel like it, I'll look and see who to root for.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I'm definitely more on the side of less White Sox full stacks, but I think, like I said, in single entry and 3-max stuff, I think the mini stacks are pretty interesting, especially with some of those Dodgers teams, because I just don't think the field is going to get to the White Sox as much as other teams on the slate that are cheaper, including this next game. Rangers and the Royals walk on the mound. Jack Leader on the mound, kind of a fireballer for the Rangers going. Royals at home here. Royals been arguably one of the better offenses over the last month. If you look at the metrics and the numbers, they're top 5 offense over the last month, especially against right-handed pitching here. Top 4 in OPS in the MLB over the last 30 days against right-handed pitching here. They're at home. Decent place to hit. This park is more wind-driven in general, but again, we talk about weather, and that first game of the slate was in the mid to low 60s in Fenway. This game is going to be 90-plus degrees the entire duration, with 5 to kind of 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing out from what I'm seeing the entire duration of this game. Definitely a good spot for bats with a nice bump in terms of temperatures-wise, with a guy that can struggle in Leader on the mound. Any interest in this game in terms of hitting?
I guess. I mean, I'm getting, again, when you put it that way, yeah, let's go. Like, give me Kansas City. But unfortunately, I'm just not getting there. I see Texas rated, for me at least, like one of the top value stacks on the board. I mean, I have Texas rated like really, really high, and they're not going to be particularly high owned, I guess. So I don't mind Texas. Kansas City, it's funny you mentioned those stats and things. Every time I play Kansas City, it looks like they're going to blow somebody out, and then next thing you know, Salvador Perez comes up in the inning ends. But what do I know? I currently, in my current runs and my dry runs, not really getting to too much of it. I'm getting to more, less Kansas City and less Texas. So for me, I know this is a cop out. It's like it's 150 max or bust. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I know that's kind of a cop out, but that's the way baseball works. I'm going to get like market share of both these teams. But when it comes to like saying, oh, who do I like if I'm going to build like 3, 5, 10 teams, these two are probably not going to be in there.
Yeah, no, and it definitely makes the stack less interesting now with Salvi Perez did just get scratched from the Royals lineup.
There you go.
So he is not in that lineup, and he has been their best hitter over the last month, at least in terms of power and fly balls there. So does hurt it a little bit. I still think they're pretty interesting overall. Garcia, Bobby Witt, Vinny P, Yastrzemski, even John Rave as a value guy in there. I don't hate it. Decent place to hit there. terms of the Texas bullpen, let me just look at their bullpen real quick. The Texas bullpen has kind of been bottom 10 or so over the last month, which does kind of help the case a little bit there. But again, yeah, to your point, it's not too flashy offenses in general. But again, everybody's going in. We're going to talk about the Coors Field game. I'm just looking for places that could potentially match or at least come close projections wise, or not projections wise, but runs wise to what the Dodgers are going to be. And I think going to a better hitting environment game like this game in Kansas City, I think is a little bit more interesting than what kind of the field and projections are showing in terms of ownership there. So I have a slight lean to the Royals side. One of my stacks that I like here tonight, a decent amount against Leader, who does have some control issues at time, which I do like as well. Next game on the slate, we are not probably going to get these lineups. It's going to be late lineups, if anything. I know Cade Horton did have a blister and leave that game early there, so the Cubs got it in the bullpen, or the Brewers got it in the Cubs bullpen pretty early in that game. That's still going on right now. It's in the 8th. Brewers are up 7-0 in that one. Jameson Taillon on the mound doesn't really strike out a lot of bats, allows some hard contact. Chad Patrick, he's actually been really, really good for the Brewers, but their entire pitching staff has been really good. They sent Patrick down to the minors just due to the nature of not having a spot in the rotation for him. He does make his way back into the rotation here with the injuries that the Brewers have had in the starting rotation there. Game in Wrigley here. This is the one weather game on the slate that you do have to monitor leading up to lock. Does seem like there's some storms here and some potential rain. Potential for a postpone here. Saying this game play sheets, any interest in terms of offenses here? Brewers been the best offense in baseball over the last month. Cubs, high-powered offense, but since the All-Star break, it seems like these guys forgot how to hit. Still have a ton of power, still have a ton of upside always, and you talk about matching the potential output of a Dodgers in Coors Field. Cubs offense definitely has the power to at least match ceiling wise. What's your breakdown?
Yeah, I don't play games that are orange as far as weather goes. That's just the way I play. If I know that there are situations where it looks like a game is not going to play, and then it plays, and they end up being low owned, and they smash and things like that, I guess. But just I don't play games with stuff that can get zeros. So I'm unless there's a real reason for me to play this game, I'm just not even thinking about it. And it's a good thing that it could rain out because, again, like you said, Milwaukee, they have like a 10-run floor every game, it seems. But and listen, in Title's absence, and we have one Wisconsin, we have another previous Wisconsin. It's kind of blasphemy for me to say I wouldn't play Milwaukee. But I'm just hoping the game rains out so I don't have to think about it anymore. Right now, I wouldn't even be getting too much of it anyway. So I'd be kind of glad if it rains out that I don't have to sweat the Bryce Turang wrecking machine again.
Yeah, it's crazy what the Brewers are doing because you look at them from a metrics and handedness and all the statistics, right, that you can dive into for baseball, and they never really realistically look like a smash spot on paper, and they just continue to do it. When you have an offense that's clicking like this and you can beat a team with playing small ball and have your occasional home runs in there, and obviously they swipe bags, that's where the upside comes in. But in single entry 3-max stuff, I'm approaching it as this game is too risky for me. So I'm in agreement there. I will say Roth does have yellow first instead of orange, so that is slightly better than having orange first. I will say that, but definitely pay attention if you are going in here. This game is at the 7:05 Eastern or 7:05 Central, 8:05 Eastern time, so you do have some time before those first two games. You got about 45 to 50 minutes in there to make some changes and run some late swaps with your portfolio there. If I had to pick a side, it'd be more on the Brewers side. It's not a homer take. It's just I ride hot hands, and having the Cubs be into their bullpen early in that first game does help the potential upside that the Brewers could have. You look at Taillon, doesn't really strike out many guys, allows a lot of decent amount of power to both sides and fly balls. So for me, Collins, Vaughn, Yelich, Turang would be the guy. Frelick would be the guys I would look at there. But again, going to be hard to see what the lineups are there, and with the weather, it's too much risk to take on, in my opinion, when you got other games, especially like at Coors Field, which we're going to talk about next. It's going to be hard to match those when you're staring at zeros in your lineups there when that game gets postponed. Let's talk about it. The game that's going to drive the slate, at least on one side, is the Dodgers. Everybody in this entire roster projected to be double-digit in terms of ownership. You got $7,000 Ohtani at the top. You can play him. He's not pitching, so obviously you can play him in terms of hitting here. Mookie Betts, $5,900 for Will Smith, $6K for Freeman, Teo Hernandez, but then you got the cheap guys at the back, the Freelands, the Rojas's, the Calls that are all projected to be in this lineup. Kyle Freeland on the mound, and then a bad Rockies bullpen behind him. Talk about it. When you play the Dodgers, how are you going to play the Dodgers? What are you going to do in terms of being different? I know a lot of times you're more trust SaberSim in your process of setting it up and having the portfolio diversifier and your different tweaks that you talk about in your video and your process. Before the YouTube chat, share at least a little insight on if you're playing the Dodgers tonight, how you're going to play them, and then any Rockies interest. Personally, not for me against Yamamoto. When we talked about pitching, he was one of our top options just overall on the slate. So enough to take me off the Rockies side of that, and the Dodgers bullpen's pretty decent. But talk about the Dodgers hitters in this one.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I use SaberSim a little bit to get in the way of my takes a little bit, because you know what? F the Dodgers, honestly. I mean, F the Dodgers and their 30% ownership. You know, listen, I've been doing this a while, and if I just usually, whenever there's these road teams in Colorado getting jammed, I'll usually just go out of my way to fade them. It's freaking baseball, for God's sake. You know what I mean? And I've just seen too many examples of this. Now, fortunately, SaberSim keeps me in check and gets me a little bit of these guys or whatever. But first of all, to somebody's point earlier, I'm not saying Kyle Freeland is going to go out and get 15 strikeouts against the Dodgers or whatever, but he's like a freaking professional Coors pitcher. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen so many times people try to go after Kyle Freeland in Colorado, and it's an exercise in futility. And I'll tell you, listen, you'll be able to find games on this board where he gave up a bunch of runs or whatever it is, but this is like that perfect example of a game where he's going to be, he'll throw his little soft change-ups or whatever it is. Dodgers will put up 3 in the first inning, and everybody will be going like this. And next thing you know, it'll be the 3rd inning, and then it'll be the 4th, and then it'll have 4 runs. Remember, to play the Dodgers at their ownership, you don't need 6 runs. I mean, you need like 10, okay? And Kyle Freeland, I mean, this is what he does. He frustrates, to me at least, he frustrates DFS players, okay, that try to go after him. Patrick Corbin does that too, to some degree, okay? But if I didn't have SaberSim keeping me in check, I would say F the Dodgers and go somewhere else, okay? It's baseball. There's a lot of variance. To me, it's the perfect spot for Kyle Freeland to just do just enough to keep the Dodgers off the double digits. And I'll tell you, I've seen this before too. They put up 8 runs, and then you still don't make optimal. You know what I mean? Like, this is a $7K price tag on Ohtani, like you were saying. I mean, that's a lot of wood to lay, So for me, I mean, I would just rather, and I'll tell you, if I'm playing one lineup, I would rather play the Braves, okay, than the Dodgers, honestly. And to that point, if I am going to play the Dodgers, I almost promise you it's going to be with Gomez in the lineup. Okay, there's no way that you're going to find, like, in any lineup that's more than $5 of mine, that's going to be like Dodgers with Cortez. It's just not going to happen. And again, depending on what type of things you play, if you want to throw in one lineup and try to cash or play cash or do whatever, okay, play Dodgers with Cortez and any of the guys we mentioned. You can make it work and play the cheapo from the Dodgers. And play Call or whatever the 2 Alexes, right? Cheapo with whatever. But I'm just not interested. So, yes, they're going to project well. I'm going to get to some. But if I was going to force any of them in, it would certainly be with like some ridiculous pitching combinations. You're never going to see me with the Dodgers and Cortez in another years.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're on the show together, because I probably fade Coors more than anybody, more times than not. I mean, realistically, the only time I can think of when it kind of killed me was when Toronto scored 900 runs in their series, right, when they were in Coors Field. This is a very similar situation, and on a shorter slate where you have less games, that's just going to inflate ownership even more. on a slate like this. So if you're playing the Dodgers, I would not play Cortez like I talked about over the pitching slate. I would not play Medeiros either. I would probably go like a Dustin May and then a Gomez, or try and find a way to play like a Dustin May or like maybe a Brady Singer or something, right? To be different in that way. Now, if you're going in there and you're trying to turn your $10 or your $20 into $30 or $40 and double your money, or maybe potentially triple your money, that's a different kind of scenario, right? Then you can play your Cortez in that. But the likelihood of you getting to the top with one lineup compared to everybody else in the competition having sometimes 150x the number of lineups that you have in your contest, it's just not the same way. It's not the way that I play tournaments. It's not the way that I want to play tournaments here. And I talk about it all the time. Freeland, you look at him at home, he's only given up one home run. The most amount of home runs he's given up this season in Coors Field has been one. Yeah, he got tagged in Toronto, but the other thing I will say too is they're going to leave Freeland out there. I mean, he's going to get some ground balls. He's going to throw his little soft tossing crap out there. And the Rockies used 5 bullpen arms yesterday, so they're going to increase Freeland's leash a little bit too. That could go south, but I've seen it more times than not. Freeland, I used to call him free money Freeland at home in Coors Field. I'm not saying I'm playing $4,500 Kyle Freeland tonight against the Dodgers. It's more I'm looking for another offense to pivot away, because there's not even one guy that's going to be low owned in this entire Dodgers lineup. Even the guys at the back half, I'll say, usually I say that's the case, the 7, 8, 9 hitters. I would likely say it's flip-flopped here tonight with the Dodgers, because that's the way you get up to a $7,000 Ohtani. That's the way you get up to a 6K Freeman, right? A 6K Smith, a Betts, right, of the world there. So that's something I'm looking at. Or if I'm playing the Dodgers, maybe I leave out a Mookie Betts, right, who most people are always going to click that name and pivot to a Bobby Witt, right, at shortstop, who has similar upside. You got a completely different roster when you're playing the Dodgers, because most of the Dodger stack you're playing up against have Mookie Betts at 5,700. You spend $200 more, you go to a Bobby Witt, or you pivot down to another guy like Nick Allen's a bad example. Maybe like a Trevor Story, right, or a Gunnar Henderson, right, who has upside against a Dustin May, who's going to get ownership in Dodger stacks. Something like that is how I'm approaching it. But I'm going to be underweight on Dodger stacks. It's just the way I play. Could go south, but again, I mean, another thing, two sheets is, if the Dodgers say they go out there and they score their 11 runs or 12 runs, you need to hit all 5 guys right? I mean, you have missed on one guy of the Dodgers, your likelihood of shipping or taking first are slim to none. I mean, realistically, are you going to make some money? Yeah. But are you going to take first place, which you're playing for in these top-heavy tournaments? Probably not, because you missed on one Dodger stack, right? So you just have to hit everything perfectly on a team like this. And that's the case of, I'm looking to go elsewhere, right? So talked about the Royals. I talked about the Braves. I like some of those teams. I like pivoting. And even in this next game, going to Anaheim here, I like the Reds. I like the Reds in this spot. A boom bust offense, more times than not, they're not going to win you anything, and you're going to want to streamline the pitcher against them. But everybody wants to streamline this pitcher, Medeiros, against the Reds with their Dodgers. I don't mind taking my Reds against Medeiros and not playing the Dodgers, and you just completely double leverage the entire field, full 90 in at bats here. And you talk about a bad bullpen in Colorado. The Angels bullpen is not good either. I like the Reds quite a bit here as a tournament pivot and leverage with some upside. Ellie De La Cruz fits the pivot right there off of Mookie Betts as well for $100 more. Talk to me in Anaheim here, Reds and the Angels.
That's excellent, and I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, like if you want to find some good piece of leverage, you don't have to go take the White Sox. I mean, this is a perfect example. Like Medeiros is going to be played with all these Dodgers or whatever. You play Cincinnati. I mean, Medeiros stinks. I mean, he's 5K for a reason, right? Like you said, he's 18% strikeout rate, like maybe, right? So you play the Reds, you get a little bit of leverage against him, and then like you mentioned Brady Singer, so you know what? You get a little sneaky correlation here, right? So you can play Brady Singer with Reds, and you can even still play the Dodgers. You know what I mean? So if you're playing like a Gomez, Brady Singer with Reds, then you could probably play 3 Dodgers in there or something like that. So I completely agree with you. I think Cincinnati's super sharp.
I like Cincinnati a lot. And I mean, you talk about control issues. Medeiros is the definition. I mean, the dude has a 20% walk rate between this year and last year. I get it. It's only 54 plate appearances, but 54 plate appearances and you have over a 20% walk rate to both sides of the plate. That's enough for me to say, yeah, you probably have some control issues, right? And you have some power concerns. So yeah, I like the Reds quite a bit in tournaments here. And I like Singer. I think pairing them up with Singer, and that's how you play the Dodgers differently there. Or you just fade the Dodgers in general, and you play the Ronald Acuñas, right? That you play the high-priced Braves, right? The Matt Olsons of the world, the Acuñas of the world, and then you're completely different. And your likelihood of holding hands at the top of the leaderboard are far less than with the Dodgers there. So I love the Reds here tonight. I'm in on them a lot. Angels side, not much interest for me. I like Brady Singer a decent amount in tournaments there. I like other teams more than the Angels here. Next game on the slate, D-backs in the Guardians. Gavin Williams, Zach Gallen on the mound. Gallen doesn't strike out a ton of guys. Gavin Williams has a high strikeout arm, but again, I talk about his walk and control issues all the time. D-backs do have some guys that can match, right? Some of those Dodgers in terms of ceiling. Corbin Carroll, Marte, Gurriel. Del Castillo actually has had a decent amount of power too. He's at a onesie position, catcher at 3,500 in the mid-tier. Any interest in this game? One of the better totals on the slate here in Arizona. D-backs bullpen, not very good either.
Yeah. So it's talked about a lot, these teams coming from Colorado. This is the thing that DFS people say. They say teams coming off of Colorado tend to underperform. It's something that people say without ever actually doing the work and doing the data analysis. I'm curious to see if that actually is the case. Because Arizona, to me, is, like you said, pretty natural pivot here. You know, they can put up numbers in the right spot, and Gavin Williams can give up numbers in the right spot. So I think they're live. Cleveland, for as long as I've been playing DFS, has been a team that no matter how many runs they put up, they never put it up in a way that smashes. They move the runners, they do whatever. Jose Ramirez seems to get like 100 doubles every game, you know. But you don't really get those big, huge ceilings. And Gallen to me is just kind of good enough to keep Cleveland off my ass, so to speak. So for me, it would be just Arizona, the Arizona side. And I do make Arizona a very legitimate pivot off of the Dodgers.
Yeah, I tend to agree. D-backs have been really good against right-handed pitching over the mat. Not really good, but above average against right-handed pitching. Yeah, they had the strikeouts to come there, but again, you're playing for ceiling potential, and you're playing for the top 1%, right, of outcomes there. And I think the D-backs definitely fit that bill. Cleveland did lose some of their bullpen arms at the deadline, and that there's still a good bullpen in general there. But anytime I like stacking against a pitcher that could go out there and walk 5 hitters. Right, he's got to come over the heart of the plate. So guys like Perdomo, right, Gurriel, Carroll, Marte, and that's where the upside comes. So I'm definitely with you. I like the D-backs a decent amount here. And again, I'm looking for offenses to match or outscore. They don't even have to outscore. That's another thing too we should talk about a little bit here, Sheets, is when we're looking for these pivots, not like, okay, the D-backs have to outscore. The Dodgers score 8 runs, the D-backs have to score 8 or more, right? That's just not how it works. There's a salary cap in baseball, right? And I mean, the likelihood of them, you winning with the D-backs, if they do score even remotely close to the Dodgers at a fraction of the ownership, is what we're playing, right? They don't have to go 1-for-1. And that's another thing too. People tend to misunderstand, right? Is, oh, they have to, right? If you look at the box scores at the end of the night, Dodgers scored 10 runs, D-backs scored 8. Okay, well, I'm dead, right? I played 5 D-backs. There's no way I beat the Dodgers stacks. That's just not how it works at the end of the day, right? Ohtani at 7K could hit a home run and then have 2 RBIs. And yeah, he put up a good score, but at 7K, a Marte could do the same thing or more, right? At 5,800, right? So just things like that are also going for you too when you're looking at a slate like this. Last game on the slate, Giants and the Padres. Robbie Ray, we talked about him in terms of pitching. Nestor Cortez is going to be probably the highest owned pitcher on the slate. Not to say you're going in there and playing the Giants here. This is more of a pitching game for me personally. MME 150 max, right? So you can say cop out. Naturally, you'll probably get some sprinkles of teams like this just because, again, it's baseball. Anything can happen. Hall of Fame hitters fail 7 out of 10 times, right? But overall, for a breakdown, any interest in offense in this one?
Sure, why not? I mean, you got, like you said, you got the highest owned pitcher on the slate in Cortez, and Cortez kind of hurt my feelings a couple of games when he was pitching for the Yankees last year. I mean, like you said, he hasn't been through 5 innings or whatever. Now the problem is the Padres bullpen is pretty good, but yeah, I mean, why not? I think that both these teams are actually kind of live. I know that you can't play everybody, and I certainly love these teams to project a little bit better. But Robbie Ray, for a lot of the reasons that we want to play him, sometimes he has issues also. And if you get the wrong Robbie Ray, then you could probably do some damage. Now the problem is that you're going to have to put up a real number here to keep up. So I don't know if either of these teams is really capable of that. So this is, again, like, what do you do with this take? Thanks, Sheets. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Give me everybody. Play San Francisco, San Diego. Well, I'm just saying that there's no reason to like X them out of like your Saber sim runs. You know what I mean? There's no reason to X them out just because, well, it probably seems like a good pitching situation, because you are getting leverage against 2 of the more popular pitchers. Maybe not as much Robbie Ray, but you're certainly going to get leverage against Cortez. So if I will say this, how about this? That if you play the Dodgers, for example, and what time does that game start? The Dodgers game starts at 8:40, and you're like really like shitting the bed in these 7 o'clock games, and like 7:40, and then 8, you're off to a bad start or whatever. I would certainly get off of all the Dodgers, right? and go blasting into this last game, okay? Or these last couple of games. And that's part of the benefit of these games being late, is you can late swap to them a little bit better. So depending on what you have going on, I certainly wouldn't mind getting to some of this stuff. Would I prioritize them? No. But I certainly wouldn't mind getting some, certainly in late swap.
Yeah, and I'll say, Robbie Ray is, usually if he's chalky, I'm fading him. He's not going to be really chalky, so that's kind of why you can play him. But, he always is live to go out there and just not have any command, any control, walk 5 guys. Tatis comes up, hits a bomb. Machado comes up, Jackson Merrill. Any of these guys, right? Adding Laureano, right? The Padres really beefed up their lineup at the trade deadline, right? Adding guys in the heart of that lineup. Laureano's who's had a really good season. So they do have upside. I hate the ballpark. Both of these bullpens are top 5 in the league as well, the Giants and the Padres. So that does hurt it as well. I'd probably much prefer to pivot to the Reds or the D-backs, but again, it's much more likely people that are chasing the top of the leaderboards, pivoting off the Dodgers, are much more likely also to pivot there, right? So talking about the pivot of the pivot, going to a team like the Padres, right, who do have high-powered offense with some power throughout against a guy that has walk and control issues, not the worst take. And if the game's 6-0, right, and Ray walked 4 guys and the Padres are scoring runs, right, you're not going to see the best arms coming out of that bullpen. It's just the nature, especially on the first game of the series. It's just not going to happen, right? They play the long game here. So that does go for it. But overall, I think we broke down the slate pretty good here in general Sheets. Any closing takes for the people here?
Sure. You play Gomez, you play anybody but Strider. So you play Gomez, you don't play Cortez either. You play Gomez with Yamamoto, and you 5-man stack like Arizona or something like that. And then you lose. But if you don't lose, you're going to be in contention for something really, really big. And listen, that's just hand building, that's whatever. But these are the things that SaberSim really sort of does in the background. It factors in what's going to be owned, it factors in upside, it factors in the distribution of results and stuff like that. And I think this is a perfect slate to at least attempt to learn to get off the chalk. To not play Cortez and the Dodgers. And yes, it could blow up in your face, and you'll lose more often than not. Like the Dodgers are going to be the top scoring stack more than any other team will be. But will they be the top scoring stack more than 40% of the time? Not so sure about that. So I think this is a really, really good slate to try to fade the chalk. And as usual, it's a pretty good slate to use SaberSim to help you do that.
Yeah, I love that take there too. And it's not to say, right, with your one lineup, even if you do play the Dodgers, that you're going to hit the 5 Dodgers that you need at the end of the day, right? So you like I talked about, you have a couple things going for you. I tend to agree there. I like the Braves a lot in tournaments. I like the Reds a ton in tournaments as well. Those are two of my favorite offenses in terms of tournaments. And then I'm a little bit higher than you on the Royals. I like the Royals. It does hurt a little bit that Salvi's in there or not in there, which does suck a little bit there. But for me, tournaments, I'm pretty high on, like I said, the Braves, the Reds, the D-backs, and the Royals. And hey, if the Dodgers beat me, the Dodgers beat me. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll try and do it all over again. So appreciate everyone tuning in. Sheets, I appreciate all your insights. I know we went a little long, but you giving the insights, talking your process and how you use SaberSim. If you want more access to that, Sheets is in our Discord. He's creating videos on some of his process. He's looking to do more content as well going forward. I know, I'm sure he's a big NFL guy as well, and he'll be in there. I know he dabbles in the tennis and the MMA stuff. I think you've been doing some stuff with Title and Marley right in the MMA streets there. So I appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate all the viewership, everyone tuning in, all the interaction in the chat. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a ton. I'm going to finish up the Slate plan, which has been live. And I talk about some of that dry run and some of the using SaberSim to your advantage, right? Because I like to filter to their Saber score, right? You don't even need the highest package in SaberSim for them to use their kind of metrics that they use behind the scenes, right? In terms of the algorithms that they have that built into their Saber score, right? Their filter. And I talk about that in terms of my write-ups for our members base over here and just kind of understanding the slate at hand and what's, I mean, at the end of the day, we're playing for first place, right? And if you're playing 40, 50% Dodger stacks like everybody else is, you have a much more slim chance to hit all the way up to the top that we're trying to do there. So overall, let's go anybody but the Dodgers here, and we'll take our chances, right? But for Sheets, I'm Nades. Good luck tonight in those contests. We'll hope to see those SHIPIT Nation logos at the top. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. Peace.